Let's move now to this issue, and it was mentioned a little earlier by my colleague Sipamandla Goge. It's an unexpected move. The United States and China signing an agreement to fight climate change. The two countries, the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide in the world. The United Nations and activists have welcomed the agreement. Of course, that's at the COP26 Global Climate Change Conference, which is seeking consensus on the way to save the planet. That's happening in Glasgow, Scotland, and it's due to wrap up tomorrow. Let's cross to our US correspondent Simon Marks to find out more. Good evening, Simon. This is great news, particularly bearing in mind that the previous president didn't believe in climate change at all and pulled out of the Paris climate change agreement. So tell me about the deal that the US and China have made.
Well, it's very interesting, and it is a surprise, Sally, because remember that just over a week ago, President Biden himself was at COP26 in Glasgow and made a speech in which he chided the Chinese President Xi Jinping and also the Russian leader Vladimir Putin for not themselves being at the summit in person. He said that the Chinese were essentially ceding global leadership on the issue of climate change to him, the American president. He said, if you're going to engage seriously about climate action, you've got to be in Glasgow. Now, there is no question that the president at the time he made that speech was absolutely aware that his own climate change czar, John Kerry, was preparing to make this announcement alongside his Chinese opposite number. This agreement is very thin on details. It contains very few data points, no timelines, very few statistics. It is the two governments announcing they're going to create a working group on climate change, getting behind the concept of reducing emissions, particularly methane emissions, backing restrictions on deforestation, saying they're going to work together on decarbonisation. But what many analysts here believe is really taking place is John Kerry, the climate change czar, eager to prove that it's possible to have a cooperative and productive conversation with the Chinese about climate change, even while there are so many other very difficult irritants in the relationship between Washington and Beijing that will come to dominate what looks like is going to be the first virtual face-to-face meeting between Presidents Biden and President Xi, and we think that's going to take place this coming Monday, a virtual meeting with Joe Biden at the White House and President Xi in Beijing. So this is an effort, it seems, by both sides to create a tapestry for the backdrop to that conversation being at least one area where they can find a way of working together.
All right, so you say details are sketchy, but it's to be welcomed, I would imagine. Do you think it's going to, how is it going to filter through in terms of what's being discussed at COP26? Because that, of course, is seeking a global deal with like over 200 countries. And we saw a live presser with Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, and she looked quite frustrated. It's getting to the business end of the conference now, and they've got to make a deal, but it's not in place yet. Could this help or hinder?
Well, I think it definitely helps. There's no question about that, because these two countries are saying in this statement that they want to reinvigorate the agreement that was struck in Paris 6 years ago. They both want to make sure that the Earth's temperature does not warm above 1.5 degrees Celsius, that magic figure of 1.5 degrees that Boris Johnson is promoting, and that activists outside the conference say is the minimum for what needs to be done in order to try and halt the disastrous impacts of human behaviour on the climate. But there's no timeline within this document for when China is going to commit itself, for example, to moving away from coal and from a raft of other issues that make China one of the worst performers on the world stage in terms of climate. It is no question that this is a welcome agreement from the perspective of all those parties to COP26, but because of the absence of specifics in it, it seems to be a lot more about the mood music in the broader US-China relationship than it is necessarily about propelling COP26 to a more substantive and meaningful final agreement.
Is it refreshing, however, to at least be engaging on these issues, bearing in mind that President Trump didn't believe in climate change, pulled out of the Paris Agreement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that President Trump, while he was president, was telling climate change and science experts out in California that they were wrong about the impacts of human behavior on the climate. And let's be absolutely clear, the Biden administration, more than predecessors, Republican and Democrat, has done more to prioritize climate change than we've ever seen here. And that's one of the reasons why, for all the excitement about former President Barack Obama's speech to COP26, greeted by many of the delegates as an absolute rock star a few days ago, the activists outside the conference site were saying, well, hang on a second, you didn't do any of the things that you promised to do on climate when you were president. So there's a real distinction between not just Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but Joe Biden and all of his predecessors on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to mean something. Thank you very much, Simon Marks, coming to us live from Washington.